Predators who clean up crime scenes. What's the most bizarre thing you've witnessed? A family friend removes the deceased from their homes, etc., since they own their own funeral home. They said that the weirdest thing they saw was a woman lying face up in a tub and a man laying on top of her. When she took them apart, she knew why they were like that. Guy had domestic abuse problems and they were going through a separation. Kids in the other room, mom in the bathroom doing her hair. The guy comes in and just stabs her several times, puts her in the tub and places the knife in her hands while he jumps on top of her and stabs himself either in the chest or abdomen and bleeds out. She said she'll never forget how sad and unusual it was, especially for those kids who thankfully were asleep. I think her mom found them. I hate thinking about it and I hope that family can heal. I've got a ton. I used to do crime scene investigation work and was an autopsy tech, so I would both go to the scene, investigate, bring the body back to the morgue, and help with the autopsy. Anyways, this person murdered their spouse and stuffed the body into a fridge and buried it in the woods. When you have a body exposed to the elements, you have normal decomposition to look forward to, such as insects, bloating gases, skin coming off, bones showing, etc. Once you've seen a few, then you know that this kind of decomp state of body is normal and you know what to expect. There are varying levels of stuff you deal with, but it's all within an expected spectrum of the job. Hope that makes sense. However, in this case, this person was sealed in, so you didn't have any of that. They were essentially stewing in there for almost a year, might have been longer. I don't remember the exact time. I wasn't there on scene when they found the person, only in the morgue, to help with the autopsy. So I prep the room, doctor comes in, and I pull out the body from the fridge and wheel them into where we do the actual autopsy. Opened the bag. And, oh, my God, the smell. I'll never, ever forget the smell. I've dealt with bodies in various stages of death and decomposition, but holy shit, this was on 10 other levels. Now the morgue has heating, ventilation, air conditioning, air filters, fresheners, and all that, but they weren't effective at all for the smell. It was so bad I gagged, which I've never done before, and almost threw up in my mask. The doctor was struggling too. The doc double-backed and almost looked like they were going to faint. It was the purest, worst, most concentrated, extremely pungent ammonia smell you could think of. I had never smelled anything like that in my career at that point. If wine ages well and is better with time, this ammonia smell did the exact opposite, and it was somewhere worse than anything you could think of. The smell stuck to us too, on our skin, for about a week no matter how hard I scrubbed. I can still smell it if I think about it. The texture of the body didn't help either. It was so slippery and wet that flecks of the ammonia fluid splashed onto my skin. The long gloves went up to my forearm, not all the way to my scrubs. It was the worst autopsy of my life. It took about 3 hours because we kept having to take breaks, and it was a difficult body to work on due to how fragile it was. It beat out everything else I saw, from the crazy accident fatalities, the interesting suicides, to even the person who had half their face eaten by rats and half their body covered in a sea of maggots and insects. Urban search and rescue team propane. Nat gas explosion. Guy's arm was holding onto a ladder going up a holding tank. No body, no anything, just an arm. Oh, I have a story about someone who launched their entrails over a bathroom that's probably 81 square feet? I clean up biohazard material, dead bodies, for my company on occasion because I'm one of the only 2 that's certified. And my coworker went into a house to clean a body, but the boss failed to mention they had been dead for 2 weeks. Okay, whatever, I can deal with that. We walked to the house and not only could you smell it from the start of the driveway, but all the windows were black. Okay, this dude had blackout curtains, I understand that. We suited up and went into the house, which was relatively clean given the circumstances. We knew he died in the bathroom, so we made our way upstairs and followed the flies. So, you know how flies swarm decaying things? Yeah, it wasn't blackout curtains in the bathroom. The windows were caked in so many flies that sunlight couldn't come in. My boss also failed to mention he died in the bathtub. You hear about bloating and blah blah blah, but do you know what happens when a body sits in a bathtub for 2 weeks and soaks up all that water? It explodes. The entrails and remains of this. Soup was all over the taking, the walls, the door. It was everywhere. There was no water in the bathtub, just this sickly pink-colored stew. That was the most disgusting cleanup I've done by far. I can't even imagine what it sounded like when that happened. Not me, but a buddy of mine. We'll call him Larry. His brother owns a funeral home and oversees the morgue at the local hospital. Sometimes Larry picks up the call-ins, mostly late night. Well, one night he gets a call to a very rural part of hillbilly country. Larry arrives at the home, but no one's there, certainly no body. He calls them back and they direct him to the barn on the other end of the property. Once located, he gets out of his car to an officer who tells him he's not ready for this. Now Larry does this a lot. He's cleaned brains off of walls, done autopsies on children, etc. So Larry's first thought when the officer said he's not ready was, dumb little softy. Then he walked into the barn. A barn filled with puke, puke and shit, chicken shit and human shit, puke and shit and feathers. And one human male corpse covered in puke and shit and feathers and a chicken corpse stuck on his dick. This guy was raping a chicken when he had a heart attack. Larry said the smell was so unbearable that he walked out and called his brother and told him to hire someone else. He quit. In the early aughts, I had a roommate who worked for a funeral home and would sometimes get called in to take bodies to the coroner's office. On Halloween morning, he got just such a call, and he said it was the freakiest shit he'd ever seen. The woman was a very devout Catholic, and she had been praying at her little prayer altar when she had a stroke or something and died. No one discovered it for several days, so when he got there, she was all turning black, but she was still posed in a praying position. He took a Polaroid, even though that kind of shit is strictly forbidden. He showed it to me, but she looked kind of slumped over. Still eerie, though. I don't clean up crime scenes, but my driver's ed teacher in high school was good friends with a DUI homicide photographer. The guy would come scare the kids every semester with gnarly pictures of people involved in fatal DUI accidents. The one picture that never left me was the motorcyclist who hit a pole face first going 100 miles. His body literally wrapped around the pole, like completely inverted, so he was inside out and his rib cage, spine were fully visible. It was like human wrapping paper. I'm a fire investigator. My worst one was a lady who committed suicide by immolation in her basement. When I got to the scene, the body had already been removed, but there was a clear pattern on the floor where she had died. An empty can of gasoline was nearby. Her glasses were gently placed on top of the water heater. On a table were several ritualistic books. Some passages were highlighted, involving ridding yourself of the darkness by performing the flame ritual and other culty stuff. So, to perform the act, she removed her glasses and placed them on the water heater. She doused herself in gasoline and lit herself on fire. You could see that she ran around the room, bumping into things and knocking things over before finally falling down at the center of the room, meeting her fate. Mental illness is some serious shit. I used to work in forensics, picking up dissidents as well as assisting the medical examiner in conduction of the autopsy. Not necessarily cleaning up the scene, but I've seen a guy who, during some kind of psychotic break, completely castrated his entire package. He then proceeded to stuff the entire package into his mouth and down his throat. He then slit his own throat. Did all of this with a cheap kitchen knife in his shower. Cause: exsanguination complicating transverse carotid and jugular severance. Manner: suicide. I don't clean yo crime scene, but this is a house in my city, my neighborhood. Old house, last known occupants were two elderly, unmarried sisters in their 70s. Sisters disappeared in late 90s. In 2000s, pest exterminators going into the abandoned house to fume it found one skeleton on a toilet. Police arrived, cleaned up remains. 10 years later, house remains abandoned with original hoarded stuff inside. Decides to clean up the hoard and finds another skeleton under the stuff. Not my story, essentially a friend of a friend's. Someone called 911, reporting a stench in a flat below them. Emergency physicians and the like show up, find a guy who had been left in the apartment for a couple weeks. The guy had drank Drano, the drain unclogger stuff. There was a trail of blood leading across the bedroom, and his body was crouched in a corner. Both his hands were at his side, but it looked like he had a hand coming out of his throat. It was his digestive organs which had essentially exploded out of his mouth when it came into contact with the Drano. I do clean up crime scenes, but the best job I've done wasn't a crime scene. An older gentleman ordered a lady of the night for a good time back at his hotel. Popped some Viagra, and while they were doing the deed, something in his penis ruptured or tore and blood just started spraying literally everywhere. Blood on the bed, floor, almost every wall, little on the ceiling and a ton on the bathroom mirror. It looked like Dexter's playground. The guy survived. I guess the injury wasn't as bad as the scene would suggest, but holy hell was that an intense job. Not me, my roommate. Used to clean up crime scenes and all that. Says the worst was the autoerotic asphyxiation guy who died dick in hand. Well, rigor mortis kicks in and this guy's hand muscles end up clamping down on his unit, hard. Well, roommate and 2 other crew members are on scene to clean it. One of the other guys was apparently new and was going to attempt to move the guy from his hanging perch. Well, because the deceased had clamped down on his unit with the strength of a lobster claw, once he was moved apparently his dick kind of exploded like a literal overfilled blood sausage, spraying everyone with specifically dick blood. From what I understand, the blood was trapped from flowing back into the circulatory system by the lobster grip. And due to how long the guy had been hanging there, it apparently became very rainy and engorged with blood. Gross image made worse by a bursting peen. Surprisingly, that wasn't the event that got roommate to quit either. This is just the most shocking. Not me, but a friend of mine interned at the local me office. One day shared with me that they were called on scene to collect a body. Guy died of a heart attack completely naked on the couch surrounded by porn movies. Last thing he yelled at his wife was, "Just leave me the fuck alone," before shutting himself in his den. The weird thing was his wife hadn't checked on him for a couple of days and just left him there before finding him and calling the police. Oh. And there was a cat box in the corner of the room with crap in it. The wife reported that they have no cats. Mexican guy here, I work in the public ministry, can't recall the English words for Ministerio Publico. I had to see the chaos that arose circa 2012 with organized crime. Pits full of body parts like, really fully, tons, so many never get identified. Beheaded men hanging from bridges, many works partners that simply disappeared to never be seen again. So, I work in healthcare. Crazy stuff comes in all the time. One time a woman came in who was shot in the vagina. She was dirty, in only a bra. I thought she was a prostitute tossed from a car. Turns out she was drinking with her BF and another guy. She and the BF got into a fight. Like, serious fight. The BF starts choking her out. So the friend runs upstairs, grabs a gun and tries to shoot out the legs of the BF. Well, he missed and shot her instead. Took a bit of explaining to clear that up. I forgot to mention, the lady did fine considering. I don't know all of the legal consequences or how all of that worked out. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Write your similar stories in the comments below the video. And also be sure to subscribe to our channel to not miss new super interesting videos, and I advise you to watch our other videos.